An arrogant martial arts champion, to prove a point, kicks a stoic, meditating figure in the head. He expected the man to fall. He didn't expect that a statue, to be a legendary master who didn't even flinch. Scene 1.1, The Stillness. In the chaotic, vibrant heart of downtown Los Angeles, within a public square teeming with the ceaseless river of humanity, an island of profound stillness existed. On a simple, low wooden platform 3 feet high, Steven Seagal sat. To the thousands who passed by, he was a living art installation, the centerpiece of a high-profile charity event for a local children's hospital. Dressed in a simple, high-quality black GI, the uniform of a martial artist, he was posed in a perfect half-lotus position. His back was an unyielding column of strength, his large, powerful hands resting palms up on his knees. A string of dark sandalwood mala beads was draped around his neck. His signature ponytail was neat, and his salt and pepper beard was sharply groomed. With his eyes closed, he appeared not as a man, but as a bronze statue of a meditating warrior, a monument to discipline amidst the urban sprawl. For nearly an hour, he had remained utterly motionless. The city's symphony, the distant wail of sirens, the rumble of traffic, the cacophony of a dozen languages, the laughter of children, washed over him, yet did not penetrate his sanctuary of calm. This was more than a publicity stunt, it was a genuine act of Makuso, a deep meditative state where the practitioner seeks to quiet the chattering mind and become one with the flow of the universe. He could feel the vibrations of the city through the wood of the platform, not as individual noises, but as a single, unified frequency. This was the core of his Aikido philosophy, not to resist chaos, but to find the unmovable center within it. A respectful crowd had formed a wide circle around the platform. People spoke in hushed tones, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and awe. They dropped bills into the acrylic donation box at the foot of the platform, took pictures, and moved on, leaving the silent warrior to his vigil. This bubble of reverent quiet was brutally pierced by a new energy, loud, abrasive, and dripping with manufactured confidence. It was Blade Tanner and his entourage. At 28, Blade was the undefeated, undisputed champion of the Ultimate Combat League, UCL, a sport that had successfully monetized aggression, packaging it for a global audience. He was a perfect product of his craft, 6'3" of chiseled muscle, with bleached blonde, artfully messy hair, and a dazzling white smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. Dressed in a neon yellow designer tracksuit with his own Blade logo prominently displayed, he moved through the crowd like a minor celebrity expecting the waters to part. Flanked by 3 training partners in matching Team Blade gear, he immediately zeroed in on the charity display. His phone was already in his hand, streaming live to his millions of social media followers. "Check this out, Blade Nation," he announced, his voice a practiced, charismatic bark. He swaggered towards the platform, turning his phone's camera to frame both himself and the meditating Seagal. "We got a real-life relic here. Steven Seagal. Remember him? Used to make movies back when dinosaurs roamed the earth." His crew laughed on cue, a sound that was both loud and hollow. The respectful crowd shifted uncomfortably, some people taking a step back. "Look at him," Blade continued, circling the platform like a shark. "Trying to look all deep and spiritual. This is the kind of traditional nonsense I've been talking about, people. They think sitting still and humming makes you a warrior. They think inner peace can stop a right hook." He laughed again. "In my world, a guy sitting this still is just a heavy bag with a pulse. This isn't discipline," he declared, his voice rising with theatrical bravado. "This is a marketing gimmick. And I think it's time someone exposed it for what it is." The storm had arrived, and it was looking for a mountain to break itself against. Blade Tanner was now in his element, the world his stage, his phone the camera broadcasting his brilliance. He had an audience, both the live, uneasy crowd in the square and the virtual, adoring one on his stream. He transformed from a simple bully into a lecturer, a self-appointed professor of modern combat superiority. "Let's break this down for a minute," Blade Nation," he said, pacing back and forth in front of the platform, a teacher before his class. "The fundamental flaw of these old-school martial arts is that they are passive. They are reactive. They teach you to wait. To absorb. To flow like water. He made air quotes with his fingers, his expression one of utter disdain. "Let me tell you something, water gets boiled. Water gets frozen. Water gets put in a damn bottle." He stopped and pointed a finger directly at the motionless Seagal. "A real fighter, a modern warrior, doesn't wait. We dictate the pace. We control the space. We are the aggressors. We are the storm, not the tree waiting to get hit by lightning." To illustrate his point, he began a series of flashy, explosive movements. He threw a lightning-fast spinning back fist that stopped a mere inch from Seagal's temple, a display of speed and control designed to elicit gasps from the crowd, and it did. He followed it with a series of sharp, percussive kicks that whistled through the air, each one a testament to his athletic prowess. "See? This is energy. This is power. This is evolution," he narrated, slightly breathless. "What he's doing," he gestured dismissively at Seagal, "is stagnation. It's a refusal to admit that the world has moved on. The quiet, stoic master is a myth from old movies. In reality, the quiet guy gets knocked out by the loud guy every single time, because the loud guy throws the first punch." His entourage nodded sagely, as if he had just imparted a piece of profound wisdom. Blade was creating his own justification, framing the assault he was about to commit as a philosophical necessity, a service to the evolution of combat. "I think we've had enough theory," Blade announced, his voice dropping, taking on a tone of dramatic gravity for his audience. "It's time for a practical application. A real-world test of these two philosophies." A woman in the crowd shouted, "Leave him alone. It's for charity." Blade shot her a withering glare, and she fell silent, intimidated. He turned back to his phone's camera. "Don't worry, people. I'm not going to hurt the old man. I'm just going to wake him up. I'm going to demonstrate, once and for all, why static defense is a fatal flaw in any combat situation." He took a deep breath, a showman preparing for his grand finale. He set his feet, coiling his body like a spring. The crowd sensed what was coming. A collective, horrified "no" rippled through the onlookers. He ignored it. He was a champion. He was Blade Tanner. He was untouchable. He launched himself into the air. It was his signature move, the Blade Storm kick, a devastatingly powerful spinning heel kick that had ended many of his professional fights. His body was a perfect, rotating engine of destruction. The heel of his expensive sneaker was aimed with pinpoint precision at the side of Steven Seagal's head, just above the temple. Time seemed to stutter. The crowd saw the kick arc through the air. They saw the brutal, unadulterated intent on Blade's face. They braced for the sickening impact, for the sight of the old man crumpling from his meditative pose. The kick connected. A loud, wet, visceral thwack echoed through the square, a sound so real and ugly it made people flinch 100 feet away. Blade landed as gracefully as a cat, spinning around to face his camera, a triumphant, vicious sneer already forming on his lips, ready to declare victory. "And that," he began to shout, "is why." His words caught in his throat. His victory cry died before it was born. His face, a moment ago alight with arrogant triumph, froze, then slowly morphed into a mask of pure, uncomprehending, slack-jawed horror. Steven Seagal had not fallen. He had not slumped. He had not even moved. For a full 3 seconds, which stretched into a silent, electric eternity, the scene was a frozen tableau. Blade Tanner stood, legs slightly bent from his follow-through, his mind utterly unable to reconcile the data from his senses. He had felt the impact, the solid, jarring connection of his heel against bone and flesh. He had heard the sound. He had delivered a championship-level knockout blow. And yet, its target remained perfectly, impossibly, still. Steven Seagal sat in his half-lotus posture, his back a rigid pillar of strength. To the stunned onlookers, it was a moment that defied the laws of physics and biology. But within Seagal's own frame, a lifetime of training had just been put to the ultimate test. In the microsecond before the kick landed, he had not braced in the traditional sense. Bracing creates tension, a point of resistance for the force to break. Instead, in his heightened state of meditative awareness, he had done the opposite. He had accepted the incoming force. He channeled his ki, his internal energy, downward, rooting his center of gravity to the earth beneath him. He simultaneously relaxed the muscles around the point of impact, allowing the skull and tissue to absorb and disperse the kinetic energy rather than meeting it with a rigid, breakable surface. It was the highest form of Aikido philosophy, not a technique, but a state of being. He did not block the force, he became one with it and allowed it to flow harmlessly through his grounded form. It was the difference between a stone wall and a mountain. A wall can be broken. A mountain simply endures. A thin, dark line of blood began to well from his temple, tracing a slow path down his weathered cheek. It was the only visible proof that the kick had even landed. For Blade Tanner, this was more terrifying than any counterattack. His entire identity, his career, his philosophy of life, was built on the undeniable reality of his physical power. His force had just met an object it could not move. The foundation of his world had not just cracked, it had disintegrated. The look on his face was not one of anger or even fear, but of a profound, soul-shattering confusion. He had just witnessed a miracle, and it was a miracle that was about to turn on him. Then, after the universe had held its breath, the statue opened its eyes. The movement was slow, deliberate, almost lazy. There was no flutter, no blink of disorientation. One moment the eyes were closed, the next they were open, and in that instant, the atmosphere in the entire city square changed. A collective, audible gasp swept through the crowd. If the non-reaction to the kick was shocking, this was terrifying. Seagal's eyes were not the eyes of a dazed victim. They were not the angry eyes of a man who had been assaulted. They were dark, ancient, and as profoundly empty of emotion as a starless night sky. They held a stillness that was not peaceful, but absolute, the stillness of a predator that has just been disturbed from its slumber and has fixed upon its prey. They settled on Blade Tanner. The effect was immediate and devastating. Blade, the champion, the juggernaut, the man who sold bravado for a living, physically flinched. He stumbled backward, his arms coming up in an instinctive, defensive posture. The crowd, his entourage, his millions of online viewers, all forgotten. In that moment, there were only two people in the universe, him, and the terrifyingly calm eyes that were now dissecting him. His livestream was still running, his phone still clutched in his trembling hand, now broadcasting his own pale, terrified face to the world. One of his entourage members, a hulking man who had been laughing moments before, was now slowly backing away, his face ashen. Seagal did not rise. He did not speak. He simply sat on his platform, a trickle of blood on his cheek, and held the younger, stronger, faster champion in a prison of his unwavering gaze. He let Blade marinate in the cold, horrifying reality of his transgression. He had not just kicked a man. He had desecrated a temple, and its guardian was now awake. With a fluid grace that defied his size and age, Steven Seagal uncoiled from his meditative posture. There was no strain, no use of his hands for support. He simply flowed from a seated position to standing in one continuous, controlled motion, like a rising tide. He stepped barefoot off the wooden platform onto the hard pavement of the square. Blade Tanner, his mind screaming with a mixture of fight-or-flight instincts, defaulted to the only thing he knew, aggression. He forced a shaky, belligerent stance, trying to reclaim the narrative. "All right, old man," he shouted, his voice a pathetic imitation of its earlier bravado. "You got a hard head, I'll give you that. You wanna go for real? Let's go." Seagal began to walk toward him, his pace slow, his eyes never leaving Blade's. "I am not here to go," Seagal said, his voice a low, calm rumble that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. "I am here to teach." Fueled by the last dregs of his shattered ego, Blade lunged. He threw a clumsy, rage-fueled right hook, a desperate attempt to reconnect with the world of physical dominance where he was king. Seagal moved inside the arc of the punch. His right hand came up, palm open, and simply rested on the inside of Blade's elbow. His left hand gently cupped the back of Blade's neck. He applied no force, no strike. He simply used these 2 points of contact to guide Blade's own charging momentum. The champion, expecting to meet a wall of resistance, found nothing. He was spun, his feet tangling, and was guided helplessly into the brick wall of a building, his face stopping a mere inch from the rough surface. Seagal held him there for a second, then released him. "Lesson 1, Seagal said, his voice calm. "Your power is a wild horse. You have no control over it. Anyone with a bridle can lead you wherever they wish." The public lesson continued. Enraged and humiliated, Blade spun around and threw a flurry of wild punches. Seagal, standing perfectly still, his hands loose at his sides, moved only his head and torso, swaying and tilting like a reed in the wind. Every single punch missed by a fraction of an inch. It was a humiliating display of wasted energy meeting perfect efficiency. "Lesson 2, Seagal said as Blade paused, panting. "You fight with your anger. It makes you sloppy. It makes you predictable." Blade let out a primal roar and charged for a tackle, trying to bring his superior size and strength to bear. As he came in low, Seagal didn't sprawl or resist. He took a small step back, allowing Blade to grasp him. Then, as the champion drove forward, Seagal dropped his weight, rotated his hips, and executed a flawless koshinage, a hip throw. Blade's feet left the ground. For a horrifying moment, he felt weightless, completely at the mercy of the man he had assaulted. He was then deposited, not slammed, onto the pavement, landing with a heavy, jarring impact that knocked the wind out of him. Seagal stood over him. "Lesson 3, he stated. A real martial artist understands leverage. It allows a small force to control a great one. You are a great force, but you have no understanding. Therefore, you are not in control. I am." He offered a hand to help Blade up. Consumed by shame, Blade slapped it away and scrambled to his feet on his own. He came at Seagal one last time, a desperate, flailing attack. Seagal sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. He ended it. As Blade's arm came forward, Seagal caught it, stepped in, and applied a standing, controlling joint lock. He didn't break the arm. He didn't dislocate it. He simply applied pressure, a sharp, undeniable, and utterly controlling pain that brought Blade instantly to his knees, a choked cry of submission escaping his lips. "Enough," Blade gasped. "Please. Enough." Seagal released the joint lock the instant Blade verbally submitted. The champion collapsed forward onto his hands and knees, cradling his aching wrist, his body trembling with a mixture of pain, exhaustion, and profound, soul-crushing humiliation. The fight was over. It had never really been a fight at all. It had been a public deconstruction. The charity event security team, a group of large men in yellow jackets, finally rushed forward, forming a protective circle. They had been holding back, unsure how to intervene, but now moved to control the scene. One guard approached Seagal cautiously. "Sir, are you all right?" Seagal, his breathing still perfectly even, simply nodded. He looked down at the defeated champion on the ground. His expression held no triumph, no satisfaction. It held only a kind of weary sadness. The police, summoned by dozens of onlookers, were now arriving, sirens wailing. The crowd, which had been a silent, mesmerized audience, now buzzed with excited chatter, phones held high, everyone recounting what they had just witnessed. "Did you see that? He never even made a fist. The statue came to life and destroyed him. Blade's entourage had long since melted back into the crowd, abandoning their fallen leader. His live-streaming phone lay on the ground a few feet away, the screen cracked, still broadcasting a chaotic, ground-level view of shuffling feet and concrete to a global audience that had just witnessed the complete implosion of a superstar's career. Blade knelt on the pavement, surrounded by security, a king without a kingdom. His reign ended not by a rival, but by a lesson he had been too arrogant to see coming. As the police began to take statements, Seagal ignored them for a moment. He walked over to where Blade was being helped into a chair by a paramedic. He crouched down, bringing himself to the young man's eye level. "Do you understand now?" Seagal asked, his voice low and devoid of malice. Blade, his eyes red-rimmed with shame, could only manage a slow, painful nod. "You have a gift," Seagal said. "You have physical strength, speed, athleticism. These are valuable things. But you use them like a child uses a hammer, to smash things, to make noise, to feel powerful." He paused, his gaze intense. "A hammer can also be used to build a house. Strength, true strength, is a tool for building. For protecting. For creating harmony, not chaos." He pointed a finger at his own temple, where the blood had dried into a dark crust. "You struck me because you disrespect what you do not understand. You see stillness, and you call it weakness. You see tradition, and you call it obsolete. You see a man meditating for a children's charity, and you see a target for your own ego." Seagal stood up. "The path of a true martial artist, a path of Budo, is a path of humility. It is a lifelong journey to perfect the self, to conquer one's own ego, not to dominate others. You have a long way to go." He looked at the paramedics now tending to Blade. "I will not be pressing charges," he announced, loud enough for the police to hear. "I believe Mr. Tanner has already received his punishment. It is up to him now whether he learns from it." With that, the lesson was officially over. The consequences for Blade Tanner were swift and brutal, delivered not by a court of law, but by the court of public opinion. The live stream of his hubris and subsequent humbling became one of the most watched viral events of the year. He became a global punchline, a cautionary tale of arrogance. His sponsors, horrified by his actions, terminated his multi-million-dollar contracts in a cascade of press releases. The UCL, seeking to distance itself from the scandal, suspended him indefinitely and stripped him of his title. In the space of an afternoon, he had lost everything. He was escorted from the square by police for questioning, a defeated man hiding his face from the world he had so desperately tried to impress. The crowd, however, had found a new focus for its admiration. After the police and paramedics had cleared the scene, a strange thing happened. People didn't immediately disperse. They lingered, their attention drawn back to the wooden platform. Seagal, having given his statement to the police, walked calmly back to it. He ignored the cameras that were still trained on him, the reporters shouting questions. He stepped onto the platform, sat down, folded his legs back into the half-lotus position, and closed his eyes. To the absolute astonishment of everyone remaining in the square, he resumed his meditation. The message was profound and unmistakable. The violent interruption had been just that, an interruption. A momentary disturbance in a sea of tranquility. It had not shaken him. It had not broken his center. His true power did not lie in the devastating techniques he had just displayed, but in his ability to return to this state of profound, unshakable peace. The crowd watched in a new kind of silence. It was no longer the tense silence of a confrontation, but a deep, reverent silence of understanding. They were witnessing the true demonstration. The lesson wasn't the fight, the lesson was the stillness that came after. The donations began to pour into the charity box, far more than before. People walked up quietly, dropping in 20s, 50s, even $100 bills. They weren't just donating to the children's hospital anymore. They were paying homage. They were showing respect to a man who had, in the space of 15 minutes, reminded them of a truth often forgotten in a loud and arrogant world. the greatest strength makes the least noise. The city's hum returned, but it seemed to harmonize with the silent, powerful presence at its heart. This story is a powerful lesson in the difference between ego and mastery, between fighting and martial arts. Blade Tanner had strength, but Steven Seagal possessed power, the power of discipline, stillness, and a deep understanding of principle. He proved that the loudest man in the room is rarely the strongest. Have you ever witnessed a moment where quiet confidence and true skill overcame loud arrogance? Share your story in the comments below. Show your respect for the masters who teach through action, not just words. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful narratives.